Today on David Drinks Dusties, we're going to try 6 different vintage bourbons. And of the 6, this one right here is going to be the last one and what I deem as my favorite one. Now, all of these are going to have varying prices, and they all have their own distinct spot, though, in why I think they are a good introduction to vintage bourbon. Some will have different proof points. They're going to have different mash bills and different pieces of history as well. So we're going to go ahead and get ready to get started. And right now, we're going to try them on David Drinks Dusties. The first bottle is probably going to be, to no one's surprise, Wild Turkey 8-year 101 proof. This one right here is done in 2001. I particularly prefer Wild Turkey that ranges from the late 80s into the early 2000s. During that time period, they would use the Cypress tanks for the mash. I think it imparts a funkiness to Wild Turkey that you don't get today. And also the barrel entry proof was lower back then. So they changed that barrel entry proof several times from the 90s until now. And I think that it really did make a big difference in how the whiskey tasted over time. Now we'll go to my second one. Keeping with Wild Turkey, we'll go with the Wild Turkey Rare Breed. As far as barrel proof bourbons go in the vintage market, there's not many offerings. You have Wild Turkey Rare Breed, which is somewhat reasonable. I mean, as far as vintage bourbons go, there's not going to be any really cheap vintage bourbons. The market is just dictated because of the rarity of them. And yeah, but this one right here is a very good bottle. You get quintessential Wild Turkey notes that you would get in the 8101, but it's amped up some. And then on top of that, you have certain batches that are phenomenal. They started doing these in 1991, and I think that up until the 03 batch, they are very good. 03 is a good batch still. It was much more mass produced. But I think that that's also coming off the heels of the 99 batch, which is regarded as one of the best Wild Turkey Rare Breed batches. This one right here is a 97 though, and it's phenomenal. Keeping with, going with barrel proofs, we have the Booker's bottles. Now, Booker's today is pretty mass produced. They do about 4 batches a year. That's not including the limited edition ones, like you have Little Book, now you have the Reserves and the Infinite. But these ones right here, they would only do maybe 1 or 2 batches a year back then. Specifically, this one is a C87 batch. But this is by far my favorite Booker's batch I've had. C87's phenomenal. It's very brown sugar molasses. You also really do not get the peanutty Jim Beam profile with vintage Booker's. Now, one interesting thing is, a lot of people believe that when they see C87, that 87's the year it was made. It's not. 87 is the year the batch was made, and it's a 7-year product. So this one right here being 87, that means that this was done in 1994. And then the this is a B. So C87B, so that's done at 87. B is the second month of the year, so February. And then 19 is the day. So this batch was done February 19th of 1987. But yeah, these are great though. I absolutely love vintage Bookers. So one of the next products we have is going to be this 1990 Old Fitzgerald Prime. It's 86 proof, but it does pack a punch. I would recommend drinking this prior to other things. If you go and you try like this 8101 or this rare breed, and then you go to this 86 proof Old Fitz, your palate's going to be blown out. You're not going to really appreciate what it is. Now, this particular bottle, it being a 1990, was produced at the Stitzelweller Distillery, which is known for some of the most famous whiskeys there is. I mean, you have Pappy Van Winkle was produced there. You have some of the older Old Fitzgeralds, like this one right here. This is a Gold Vein Old Fitzgerald that was done in the 1960s. Now, this would have been done by Pappy himself at the Stitzelweller Distillery. Now, you are also going to find that they did Weller bottles, Cabin Still, and then several private labels. Now, Stitzelweller stuff, I like it. I think it's very good whiskey. If I was going to pick something though, if I had it, like I had a budget and I'm like, oh, let me pick what I want within this budget, there are other things that are better than this. For instance, anything to the left, I would pick over this. But it does have its own place in history. And because of that, I think it's a good entry bottle into the dusty market. Now, what kind of list would I have without a vintage Blanton's? Blanton's was produced by Elmer T. Lee. He came up with the idea for Blanton's, wanted a single barrel product to be a premium product that they would sell. And what's cool about it is it's named after Albert B. Blanton. And the reason that Blanton's is only chosen at Warehouse H is because that was the warehouse that Albert B. Blanton would go to, and that's where he would pick his honey barrels. And by honey barrel, it's not referred to honey barrel in the terms of saying, oh, it's the most delicious barrel. Those barrels in Warehouse H were chosen specifically because they were by the windows. And the honey barrels chosen by the windows were given that distinction because they were not dark and like blackened like the other barrels. The windows would make the barrels bleached and give it more of a honey hue, which is why they were called honey barrels. Now people call honey barrels because they think they're just delicious. But prior to the purchase of Blanton's by Takara in the 90s, many of these bottles were aged significantly longer and were much better than the later iterations. So I would definitely recommend getting one of these earlier Blanton's. They're very, very good bottles. And then finally, what's in my glass right here is going to be some pre-fire Heaven Hill. This is Anderson Club 15 year. Anderson Club 15 is going to be by far one of the most budget-friendly bottles. It's marginally more than this 8101 right here. This one specifically was produced in 1992, which means it was distilled in the 1970s. Now, if you all don't know, Heaven Hill, they lost their distill in the 1990s during the fire, and the fire caused them to lose their still. They lost several rick houses, and because of that, people believe that pre-fire whiskey is much, much better. I've had several different iterations of pre-fire whiskey, and I've had friends that are whiskey noobs that have come in and they've just wanted to try vintage bottles. I don't tell them that's pre-fire, and they'll be like, oh my gosh, what's that? That's so good. And I'll be like, that's Heaven Hill. And they're absolutely blown away. One of my friends, he just refuses to even drink regular Heaven Hill bottles now because he has been absolutely spoiled by pre-fire stuff. Go ahead and give this a taste though. Yeah. At 86 proof though, this is absolutely phenomenal. It's super sweet. You get a little bit of the dusty funk that you would expect with some vintage whiskeys. Some of the oak influence, you can definitely smell it. It is kind of, I'm not going to say like cedar-like. It's more like if you go to a sawmill and you smell what a small sawmill smells like. Go ahead and give it a taste. Yeah, it's very oaky. That oak carries through though, follows you all around your palate. It makes you salivate some. It's super sweet though, and that's one thing I prefer is a sweeter oak. I do not mind like if you get some oak that's like super dry and tannic, that holds its own place. But if I'm going to have like a sipper that I want to just sit down and enjoy, I could enjoy an ounce of this no problem. You do get a little bit of a green tea note as well, some citrus. We'll go ahead and give it another try. Yeah, you definitely get some of that citrus in this. It kind of reminds me of, it's almost like a mix of an Earl Grey and a green tea. So you get a little bit of the grassy notes from the green tea, but then you get some of the dark tea notes from like an Earl Grey, and then with a little hint of citrus. A little bit of sugar cube added to it as well. And then on the finish, you get all that oak influence. It just stays in your mouth and it just pretty much lasts forever. It's very oaky. But like I said, it's not oaky in a bad way. It's sweet oak and it's very enjoyable. I've had some Elijah Craig 18s that are very over oaked. And when you try them, you're just like, whoa, that's super oaky and super dense. It's just too much. It overpowers everything else, whereas this right here is very well rounded. Now, I've had some people ask me where you can find like vintage bottles. I mean, you're going to be able to go to like some secondary places. Neat will have some, Justin's House of Bourbon does. You can also go to bars. Yet again, Neat Bar will have them. Doc Crow's in Louisville might have them. Justin's House of Bourbon also has them. And then Jack Rose in Washington, D.C. does as well. Now, as far as buying them, besides going to a store, you have like yard sales you can go to, estate sales, and then you can look at like unicorn auctions. That's a good example as well. They run about probably 10,000 bottles through a month. Of those 10,000, I would say probably 500 to 1,000 maybe vintage bottles. And that's where I believe I got this Booker's was from Unicorn Auctions. But I do recommend like looking, and it takes a lot of footwork to find vintage bottles, and it does prove rewarding though. I enjoy coming and having these bottles with you all, but also there's nothing better than sitting down with your friends and giving them an experience that they don't have. I appreciate y'all watching. These right here are what I believe as some of the best introductions to vintage whiskeys. This may change over time, but I think this is a solid starting point. Now, as far as pricing goes, this bottle right here, you could probably get one of these for like 250 bucks. These rare breeds, they do vary by batch. So, I mean, if you're going to get a 91 batch, that's the first year, it's going to be significantly more expensive. I would recommend getting a 1999 batch. And you can get one of those for around $400. This Booker's is going to be the most expensive bottle up here. Vintage Booker's, I find that if you get in the early 2000s, the early 2000s are kind of like the sweet spot of value. You can get one of those for around 300 bucks. This Old Fitzgerald, this is going to be kind of expensive for what it is. It's a good introduction, and like I said, there's a lot of history that goes with this bottle. But you can get one of these for around $350, I would say. Now, this Blanton's is a little different. This one's a store pick, so there's really not going to be many examples of these. But A 91 Blanton's, you can go get them for around $400, $500. They are expensive, but the stock inside these is phenomenal. If you're going to go and spend money on a Blanton's Gold or a Takara Gold or straight from the barrel, I would definitely recommend spending the money towards one of these before one of them. This is a much, much better whiskey. And then finally, this Anderson Club 15 year. You can get one of these for around $300. And now, what's crazy is a 15-year whiskey produced today, if you go and any NDP, they'll be selling it for almost $250, $300. So why spend the money on something like that when you can get something produced in the 1970s, where they distilled it in 1977, bottled in 1992, and it is something that can't be replicated because Heaven Hill no longer has the stills capable of producing this. So, like I said, this is my introduction to them. I hope you all enjoyed it, and we'll be dropping another video soon. Thank you very much, and like, comment, and subscribe.